ANC says the primary role of its proposed government of national unity will be to deal with the triple challenge of poverty, unemployment and inequality in South Africa. The governing party opted for this after failing to secure an absolute majority after last week's election. Let's make sense of this moment. Bring in political analyst Sandile Swana, who joins us now via our video link. Mr. Sandile Swana, I beg your pardon. Thanks very much indeed for making time. It's great to have you on the SABC. Admittedly, we know a whole lot more today than we did know at the beginning of the week. That said, we still actually know very little about how all of this is going to look. Do you reckon this will work?
Thank you, Ian, and your viewers. As a temporary step to move forward, it will work. But whether a government of national unity will finish the term of 5 years is another question altogether. Because indeed, the first one by 30th of June, I think it was 1996, the National Party made a decision to move away from the government of national unity just over 2 years. It lasted about 2 years, and then Van Schalkwyk came and tried to give it a little bit of life, but it didn't last long. And there are fundamental differences here, and the interests of the public are still obscured.
Yeah, and I suppose from this point onwards, we'll be juggling the pros and the cons. I mean, people who are for this form of government speak about how inclusive it is. It does mark a new chapter in our political maturity, hopefully. It allows a whole lot more voices to be heard. But you're absolutely right. Those who are a bit more cynical point to the fact that it also comes with a fair amount of instability because of how difficult it is to get a large group of political opponents, frankly, to move in one direction.
Yes, the thing about it is that, let me start off by saying that South Africa has a long history since 1910 coming to now of coalitions of various kinds. Let's just start there. So the issue of these types of coalitions, governments of national unity is not new. But what we need to be careful about is the relationship now between the ANC and the DA first and foremost. These are two parties that are used, these specific two, are used to be boss. You've heard the DA saying, where we govern, this is what happened. We want an outright majority. And that is how the first government of national unity collapsed. The ANC was there and the National Party wanted to be boss. So even before you talk about the other parties, would be whether the DA and the ANC are able to listen to each other in the first place if they sit in one room.
Yeah. Beyond that, both organizations, this is the ANC and the DA, have had such an antagonistic relationship even before this campaigning period. I mean, part of what the DA has sold to its core base is the fact that they're here to ensure that the ANC does not come to power or into power. The ANC has pretty much said the same thing to its own core supporters. I wonder how you reckon they'll be able to spin this if, in fact, these two organizations, at the very least, do form part of this national government of unity.
Yes, the thing is that the ANC has said what it said, and of late, obviously, they've hitched their hopes on this Palestine question and things like that. But the ANC that you have today has no moral authority. It has no ideological clarity. It's an ANC that the DA knows that virtually on every leader of the ANC, including Ramaphosa, they can pull a file of criminality or corruption. As the case is, right now the Phala thing is coming back to life. Mbalula on the other side is being charged. Zizi Kodwa on the other side. So the mutual respect is in big question between these two parties. And the DA wants to do away with BE, they want to do away with EE, they want to fiddle with the grants and all sorts of things. So there are many problems, and I think the biggest problem is that mutual respect is a big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. What's also not lost on a lot of people who are watching the story unfold very closely is that, frankly, all you need in South Africa at the moment is largely two organizations to get a 50%. So the cynics have already come out to say, this government of national unity is really going to be an opportunity for two organizations to have a dominant voice, with the other smaller parties being tokens in some ways, being window dressing? Because ultimately, if a decision needs to be made, the argument is these two organizations will make that decision and in some ways force the other parties to follow suit. Is that fair?
I think that the ANC, when it comes to the other parties, such as the EFF and so on, they have to bear in mind that any reckless decision at national level could have ramifications at provincial and at local level. So the so-called smaller parties have a bit of leverage. And there's something else that is a dead snake that keeps being hoisted and foisted upon South Africans. Something along the lines that if you have the DA in an alliance or a government of national unity, then you make investors comfortable. But my understanding is that Thabo Mbeki in his regime didn't have any DA in there, and the economy was growing above 4%, and in fact it was one of the best periods in South African economic history without the interference of the DA. So I think those things need to be taken. There are other people who are bringing false boogeymen to intimidate everybody about this whole process.
That's interesting. Another very important question has been around where this leaves opposition politics in South Africa. I mean, up to this point, we knew very well where the lines of demarcation were drawn. The ANC had a majority, they were in government, and quite frankly, some people say we had a pretty strong opposition, at least in the recent past. If there are a whole lot more parties that form part of this GNU, this Government of National Unity, concerns have been raised about ways in which that actually weakens the voice of the opposition. And in a country like ours, where so much has been revealed by the opposition, questions are being raised about where this leaves our democracy, frankly.
De Klerk, unfortunately, De Klerk raised a similar argument when he walked out of the Government of National Unity when he launched around 1996-97. But the problem you have is that our culture itself is in jeopardy, because some of the problems that the ANC has caused could have actually been stopped by ANC members in an NEC meeting, NWC meeting, at conference. But instead of stopping these malpractices, which have cost the ANC the majority in South Africa in any event, and I'm glad that they've lost the majority, there are cowards, too many cowards in the ANC, too many cowards in politics today, people who don't stand up for anything, and they allow all wrong things to go. You don't need to be an outside political party. You need to stand for principles everywhere, all the time. And that is what has caused us to be now in this mess that we're in.
Yeah, I suppose then the question becomes whether or not we think people will now be more likely to speak out or less likely to speak truth to power, especially if they find themselves in this very government where speaking out may compromise whatever agreement may be in place.
Well, if we take your argument, then we have to say this GNU is bribery. It is bribery and corruption by itself. For an example, the EFF now has received notification that they can pursue the Phala Phala case. If they get given positions by the ANC or in this GNU, then they drop the case. Then we would know that this is founded on corruption. There are many cases that of the comrades that must go to court, and nobody should be dropping cases because they are being given positions in this. So everything must go according to merit and according to the law, without fear or favor at any time.
That is certainly the hope. Time will tell whether or not it will become the reality. Political Analyst Sandile Swana, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Really do appreciate your analysis as we continue making sense of this moment. Once again, still not very clear what this Government of National Unity will look like if, in fact, the organizations that are meant to form part of it do accept the proposal in its current form. Once again, Sandile Swana, thanks very much indeed.